Hey, welcome everybody to the repartee. Doug Pagitt in today, and it's Monday, the day after the Mueller report came out. Hey, Brett, I don't know if you remember, but last Wednesday we were chatting after the show, and we were talking about the programming for Friday, and we said, we should probably think of some special programming in case the Mueller report comes out on that Friday, and we happened to nail that one.
Right at 4 o'clock, yes.
Yep, came right out, right at showtime. I was sorry to not be available to be doing the show last Friday at that time.
We were kind of thinking anyways. I mean, as Hunter was saying on air, we were pre-recorded that day. It would have been tough to say what you're going to talk about in that first hour when no one knew anything. All we had known is that Barr got the report.
Yes,
and of course, we found out Sunday that he gave his little summary.
Yeah, gave the summary, and I guess we would have known that they. I don't remember at 4 o'clock or was it 5 o'clock that we found out.
It came in, right around like 4:45 because I was listening into the car. Yeah, I think that's kind of when they started saying no further indictments.
Yeah, no further indictments. That's the parts that surprised me. All right, so here's my take. You want my take on this? I'll give it to you. Here's my take on this. I am pleasantly relieved that the Mueller investigation found no criminal conspiracy amongst the Trump campaign and the government of Russia. I am pleased that that's not true. I believe that Donald Trump has, in many ways, chose to partner with Russia, to support Russia, even speaking out, hey, Russia, if you're listening. I think Donald Trump has engaged in all kinds of behavior with Russia that's inappropriate. I think he's clumsy. I think he was wrong. I think he would have gladly participated in something that could have risen to the level of conspiracy, but he didn't. And I'm glad about that, because had that been the case, had Robert Mueller found out that the Trump administration, according to the language that they would have used for cooperation, and this is the language that they use, the definition, the special counsel, this is reading off of the report from Attorney General Barr, the special counsel defined coordination as, quote, an agreement, tacit or express, between the Trump campaign and the Russian government on election interference. If we'd found out that in addition to Russia interfering in our election, and we'd found out that, as we did in this report summary, that the Russian government reached out to the Trump campaign and asked for their participation, had we found out that they went through with that to the level of a conspiracy, it would have put this country through the kind of crisis that would have been so painful and so horrible and so ugly. So I will just say, I am glad that amongst all the criminality that I believe the Trump administration has been engaged in, all the nefarious activities, all the cover-ups, all the behavior that to my mind rises to the level of obstruction of justice, that they also did not behave in such ways that it was clearly set out as a conspiracy with the Russian government. If the upside to all of this is that with all the bad behavior of the Trump administration, they also did not conspire at a legal level with the Russian government, that's at least good news. At least now we don't have to feel like that there was criminally chargeable behavior. We can take on the Trump administration on the merits of their own actions and behaviors. We've all seen them. We all know what they are. We've heard them. We watched Donald Trump's praise WikiLeaks. We heard him say, Russia, if you're listening, find and release those emails. We know that he met with Kislyak. We know all the kinds of behavior that he was engaged in firing Comey and saying it was because of this Russia thing, as he likes to say it. We know that the FBI opened a counterintelligence investigation against the president after his election because they could not reconcile his behavior. Knowing all of that, which is plenty for people to move against this president, I think plenty to impeach this president and all the rest, that he also, in addition to those bad behavior, did not conspire at a criminal level against the United States of America with the Russian government, is so relieving to me. Now, is there part of me that kind of has this I can't stand Trump to such a degree and the damage that he's done to the well-being of this country that I wish that he would be removed from office early? Absolutely. But I have never thought that the best way to remove the president from office was to have the Justice Department find him a criminal. The best thing to do if with any president, is to be able to vote them out. That's the best thing. Donald Trump, I think, has acted in such ways that the best thing that we would ever want for this country, we can't have, that we would just go through another election in 4 years after his first election, and the people of this country would make a decision. That's the way it normally goes, but not with this guy. The kinds of behavior that he has engaged in for the last 2 years and for the 2 years previous to the election have been so nefarious, so off-putting, so outside the norm that we now have to put the Congress in a position where they have to determine if they need to impeach the president. And again, remember, this was not some other administration. This was not a democratically led Congress that was out to get the president. This was the very Justice Department under his administration. This was the Justice Department under his Attorney General. These were people appointed by him that were leading this investigation. Rob Rosenstein, Jeff Sessions, who had to recuse himself, and all of the different entities that engaged in this activity were functioning under the leadership of the Justice Department of the Trump administration. This was not a bunch of outsiders coming into the Trump administration. This was, for all practical purposes, an internal investigation that took 2 years to get to the level that Fox News had a headline that read, "Mueller report summary released, showing no proof Trump team conspired with Russia." If the good news to the Trump administration is that after an investigation by the FBI, then an investigation by a special prosecutor that had to be appointed because your own attorney general had to recuse himself because of his contacts with Russia. If all of that is the good news, that they did not find proof of your conspiring at a criminal level, that's unbelievable. That's not great news. Now, I'm glad that it didn't go so far as the president's being criminally charged. That would put us into a really significant constitutional and emotional crisis in this country. Does that mean that the president is qualified to be the president of the United States? Absolutely not. He's not. He shows that he's not capable. In my estimation, what he was so nervous about, the reason he did what he could to downplay, to downtalk, and to interfere with the investigation, if not in its actuality of function, which I believe he did, but even if it wasn't in the actuality of its function, in the minds and the trustworthiness of it to the American people. The reason he engaged the way that he did was precisely because he was afraid that the Mueller investigation was going to find that the Russians interfered in our election in a way to benefit Donald Trump. He knew that they had, because as the report tells us, the Russian government reached out to the Trump administration, according to the report, on multiple occasions, and they did not reciprocate, which means the Trump campaign, even before all of the determinations after the election, the Trump campaign, during the campaign, knew that the Russians were reaching out to them, asking them if they would work together. And this is what Donald Trump didn't want people to find out. I believe he obstructed justice, not because he knew he had committed a crime. He obstructed justice because he did not want people to find out that the Russians had committed a crime. And Robert Mueller prosecuted or indicted 16 people in a whole range of indictments against Russians for the very activity that Donald Trump knew they engaged in, and that's why he was trying to downtalk this investigation. So this is what I find super curious. Is there were two things that the report summary puts out that Robert Mueller looked into. One, did the Trump administration or did the Trump campaign at all coordinate in the interference with the Russians in the 2016 presidential election? Did they do that? Did they participate in that way? And secondly, did they obstruct justice? Now, what they concluded was that there was no coordination to the level of agreement between the Trump campaign and the Russian government on election interference. Does that mean they didn't find some ways to partner? Does that mean that they knew what one another was doing? No, what he's saying is there was no agreement to interfere in the election. What I'd be interested to find out from Robert Mueller and from the other investigators is, did some of the investigators believe, did they think, did they feel like what was going on was that the Trump administration wasn't entering into an agreement on election interference, but that they were pleased with it? And some of the investigators were saying, I think this rises to the level of a conspiracy. And other investigators or other prosecutors on the team were saying not. What were the internal dialogues happening within the special counsel's team about this? In other words, did everyone conclude the same, or was there a rigorous argument about if this rose to the level of conspiracy or not? That's something the American people need to know. This is where the underlying documents, as much as they can be made available, become very important. We want to hear all of this. But the argument basically from William Barr, the Attorney General, is that without a crime of conspiracy, then it's too difficult to produce a crime of obstruction of justice, because you have to have had a first crime for there to be a second crime. After the break, I want to talk about why I think that's not the only standard there could have been, and why I know that Attorney General Barr also knows that's not the only standard. He even referred to it as, generally speaking, to obtain an obstruction conviction, you need to have an underlying crime. The underlying crime may not have been Trump's. The underlying crime was the Russians, and Trump knew about it, and he didn't want the American people to know about it. I think that's what he was trying to cover up. We're going to come back here after the break. AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota, and this is the Repartee.
Hey, this is Rick Shiomi from Full Circle Theater Company.
Hey, and welcome back, all. Hey, still talking about the Mueller report. I want to talk about that for the bulk of our time here. I'm going to get to some callers here in a second, but I want to finish a couple of thoughts. Brett, what I see happening here is that the Trump administration knew that the Russians had participated in interfering in the election, of having some effect. In fact, in the report summary that William Barr sent out, at the bottom of the first section on Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election, I thought it was interesting that Attorney General Barr wrote this sentence. But as noted above, the special counsel did not find that the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in these efforts, despite multiple offers from Russian-affiliated individuals to assist the Trump campaign. Despite multiple offers from Russian-affiliated individuals to assist the Trump campaign. So what Attorney General William Barr says Robert Mueller's team found out was that multiple offers from Russian-affiliated individuals were made to the Trump campaign. Now, is it possible that the Trump campaign said yes to those, but they didn't know that they were directly related to the Russian government, so it didn't rise to the level of conspiracy? We don't know that. But at a bare minimum, the Trump campaign knew that Russian-affiliated individuals reached out multiple times to help with the campaign. And Donald Trump's campaign said continuously during the election, during the debates, and in the 2 years of his presidency, has continued to say, we do not believe that the Russians interfered on our behalf. The intelligence community finds it. Robert Mueller has found it and has prosecuted individuals and an organization related to the Russian government. And he continues to say to this very day that it didn't happen. So why was he obstructing justice? Well, he was obstructing justice because he didn't want those facts to come out. Those facts are incredibly damning. The idea that that they didn't agree to work with the Russian government to a level of conspiracy is so unbelievably far-fetched. Look, anybody in any point in this whole conversation was saying, look, if the president actually entered into an agreement with the Russian government, which you would need to have a level of conspiracy, that's unbelievable. It's nearly impossible that you could even make that happen. Now, I believe that collusion, the idea of sort of cooperating with, is something different than what coordination and conspiracy are. And so did Robert Mueller. The reason they spent 2 years, the reason, as they say, they had nearly 1 million pages of documentation is because it took a lot to get to the bottom of this. You know, if you had looked at the Obama administration, the Bush administration, the Clinton administration, the Bush administration, the Reagan administration, the Carter administration, the Nixon administration, and said, we're going to look into the level at which you colluded with Russia to interfere in this election, it wouldn't have taken 14 minutes to conclude that there's no proof. With the Trump administration, because of the lies, because of the number of people, because of all of the people they had to interview to get to the bottom of this. And then, even then, all they could say was it didn't rise to the level of conspiracy, even though we know that they were approached by Russians. This is the hard fact and the sickening part of this whole thing. The way Vanity Fair writes it in this great little quote reads this: Donald Trump was elected president of the United States after a sustained series of crimes by the Russian government aimed at boosting his chances of winning. Because of the political damage to the president that Russia's criminal interference posed, he had an obvious reason to terminate the investigation. In other words, he had something to hide, and the Mueller inquiry seems to have concluded that there was plenty of evidence that he hid it. And I believe that that's true, too. So I think there's a big debate between Robert Mueller's team and Attorney General Barr about, did these actions that Donald Trump took place, in which in the report review or summary, it says many of which have been known to the public, which means there are some that were not known. Donald Trump did other things that we don't even know about. Did they rise to the level of obstructing justice? And his conclusion, as Barr writes, again, this is only in his own words, is that Robert Mueller did not make a determination if he should be charged or not charged, and finds there's nothing that, how does he put it? And that it's not determinative that the evidence of an underlying crime exonerates the president. He goes on to say this: generally speaking, to obtain and sustain an obstruction conviction, the government would need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a person acting with corrupt intent, 1, engaging in obstructive content, 2, with sufficient nexus to a pending or contemplated proceeding, which means that there's a crime. What Barr argues, and it's a fine argument to make, he's the Attorney General, he's a smart guy, understands the law, he makes the argument, because there was no conspiracy crime, then we cannot charge him with trying to obstruct justice, because you can only, in his view, generally speaking, as he puts it, obstruct justice if you're trying to cover up a crime that you know you'd be guilty of, right? So other people would say, I would be one of them, no, I think you could obstruct justice for other reasons other than your own crime. What about trying to cover up someone else's crime? In other words, the Russians. Barr says, I don't think that rises to level. So Robert Mueller's team does not say do not prosecute. Instead, he says, Attorney General, this is your call. And then William Barr writes that he and Deputy Attorney Rod Rosenstein have concluded that the evidence developed by the special counsel's investigation is not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offense, based on the fact that conspiracy was not proven as a crime. Now, a lot of people would push back. He even goes on to say that he consulted with the department officials and the Office of Legal Counsel. He doesn't say that the Office of Legal Counsel agrees with his conclusion. He just says we consulted with him. So that's what we're facing here. Is this an exoneration? I guess in the sense that he didn't conspire criminally at a provable level, but is that really what we want out of a president? It's unbelievable. How about turning in the Russian individuals that want you to conspire with the Russian government? Isn't that what we would expect from a president? All right. Hey, Randy in Coon Rapids. How are you thinking about this, my friend?
Oh, Brett. Man.
No, I'm Doug.
Doug.
Wrong Rappeteer, yes.
You sound about as bitter as a person could possibly
be. Come on, Randy. Knock it off. There's nothing bitter about that. Don't give me that jazz.
Think about this.
Don't give me that jazz.
This, Doug.
Yeah.
If the Russians had a choice, Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, you can't tell me one piece of evidence. I'm saying one piece of evidence that would tell you the Russians would want Donald Trump in there versus Hillary Clinton.
All right, Randy, hold on. Randy, look, I'm not telling you that. I'm just telling you that's what Robert Mueller concluded. That's what the CIA concluded. That's what the counterintelligence concluded. That's what all of the people who've looked into this have concluded. For you to suggest that that's off the table, for you to say that Russia did not act to try to help Donald Trump's presidency, if that's your argument, look, that's a given in this conversation. That is something that you have to say. That is assumed knowledge on behalf of everyone engaged. Do you not grant that?
You know what I'm?
Yeah, go ahead.
You know what I'm saying?
What are you saying?
22 months of investigation, $25 million, nothing is found, close the book, let's move on. Now,
Randy,
in the future,
okay, Randy, thanks. Hey, cut him off. No. Okay, listen, Randy, this is not, when a person behaves in a way in power and needs to be investigated, no one should say, hey, you created the conditions by which there was an investigation, didn't catch me, let's now move on. What I would think any Trump supporter would say is, look, the president behaved in ways that invoked his own Justice Department to launch an investigation into him. Think about that for a minute. Just be honest with yourself. His own Justice Department said, we can't get to the bottom of this. We need to investigate the President of the United States with a special counsel. Let's bring together the best team we can to get an answer. Why did they have to do that? Because of the behavior of Donald Trump. Now, if you're some deep state conspiracy theorist that says, no, it was just all fake and a whole bunch of people were trying to take down the president, and the only thing they wanted to do was take the president out, then I will simply ask you, if they conjured up all of this to run a 2-year, $25 million investigation under the Justice Department, overseen by Attorney General Sessions and then by Deputy Attorney General and then by Attorney General William Barr, they would all have to be in on it. All of those people would be in on this investigation. And then at the end, they don't also fabricate evidence. If you're right that all of this is fake, that all of this was made up, there was no reason for it at all, they were just deep state out to get Trump, then why would they pull their punch at the end? Why wouldn't they go all the way through and say, here's the evidence of conspiracy? Why would they show themselves to be not finding a crime if they were the ones rigging the whole thing? This is just outrageous. All right, we'll come back after the break. Sorry, I know I got some people hanging on. But man, it's just, this is the kind of thing that makes people just throw their hands up. And hopefully they're not driving when they do. So if you are, keep your hands on the wheel. We'll be back here after the break on AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota, with Minnesota's Progressive Repartee. Hey, welcome back, everyone. Doug Pagitt in today. It's Monday, the Monday of the Mueller Report. Hey, I know I've been keeping Gary and Mark waiting, so let's jump to them. Hey, Gary, how you doing?
Yeah, you know that Randy, he needs to get in the real world like the rest of them Republicans. A lot of them call themselves the holy ones, and it's so hypocritical. For 8 years, there wasn't no investigation on Clinton. That was the Inquisition. That's all that personal stuff about his sex life and all that, and then impeached them over that, and then they're crying about a witch hunt. That was the Inquisition. And then this Russia, we were soft on Russia, soft on communism, and then they wave, you're the party of sinners and all that crap. They wave the Bible and the flag in our face, and now they're sleeping with Russia, and they're Trump. Look at Trump and Stormy Daniels, and he paid her to hush up and woke campaign finance law. I can go on and on about all this. I get too upset about it.
Yeah, well, thanks, Gary. Thanks for giving us a chance to join you and getting that off your chest. I know it makes a lot of Republicans look like hypocrites when they say what they said about Bill Clinton and then what they're saying now about Donald Trump. I will say, look, I think what Bill Clinton did in deceiving the American people is something that he should have been held accountable for, and he was, right? And I think what Donald Trump has done in deceiving the American people and in not turning in the Russians that his campaign was approached by for wanting to interfere in the election. He should be held accountable for that. In addition to all the other things that I think that the Trump administration has done that are illegal, including the putting kids in cages and the immoral nature of their tax laws, and there's a whole lot of reasons to be against Donald Trump moving the capital or the embassy of the United States to Jerusalem, and what he did in the Golan Heights today. I mean, I'm opposed to Donald Trump on every front. I'm pleased that he didn't show his crimes to be so obvious in his conspiracy with the Russian government. But if the upside to Donald Trump is he can't be proven to be a conspirator with the Russian government, he's just a friendly with them against the wills of the American people's voting, as again was stated in the summary report. That, quote, based on these activities, the special counsel brought criminal charges against a number of Russian military officers for conspiring to hack into computers in the United States for the purposes of influencing the election. And despite multiple offers from Russian affiliated individuals to assist the Trump campaign, they did not coordinate with them. So they knew that it was going on. They knew it was happening, but what they didn't. So this idea that, well, Russia didn't do anything. See, here's the thing that I think some people are suggesting. Some people are suggesting that because no conspiracy was found, then Russia didn't interfere in the election. It's the opposite of that. Russia interfered in the election, and it's not proven that the Trump administration conspired with it. Hey, let's go to Mark and Fridley. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Doug. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because as we speak, Israel is bombing Palestine.
Yep.
And it has everything to do with this, but we would be sidetracked. Again, the annexation of the Golan Heights by tweet without any support on behalf of Congress is in fact treasonous.
Right.
But what we need to talk about is Bill Barr and people like Rosenstein. Because people's expectations were unrealistically high for what, and this is what I said was going to end up happening. First, Bill Barr has, again, these people, Bill Barr, Jim Comey, Brennan, Bob Mueller, have been involved in government service since the H.W. Bush.
Right.
And Bill Barr was CIA. He is CIA. Anybody can look that up. That's where his career started, and he started working for H.W. Bush. So his claims to fame are covering up Iran-Contra, covering up the Bank of Credit Commerce International scandal, which we should really be talking about, covering up the theft of top-secret security information to spy on American people, try to obstruct the Church Commission. That's who this guy is. And a little bit about Rod Rosenstein, because let me give you a quote specifically from Rod Rosenstein's face. And about a year ago, he said, one of the challenging issues we face in the Department of Justice is the question of whether transparency is a good thing.
Yeah, right.
And there's a knee-jerk reaction to suggest that we should be transparent about what we do in government, but there are a lot of reasons not to be transparent about what we do in government. There might be a lot of reasons not to be transparent in what they do in government, Mr. Rosenstein, and none of them are good.
Are good reasons. Yeah, thanks, Mark. And you've been a lifetime advocate of that position. I think it's really helpful. You know, on the spectrum of how much openness and transparency and how much protected and secrecy you have been, I know, in your life and on this show and other places, you've been advocating strongly that there be more openness about what the government is doing and what it needs to do. And I think that, you know, this is one of those times where a lot of people feel like we want to know more rather than less. And I think you've been right so often. I think you're right on that one, too. So thanks, Mark. Thanks for the call. Hey, David and Shakopee, what's your thoughts here on proof of collusion and the Trump administration and conspiracy?
Well, I have to adjust it a little bit based on what you said. I have to turn it more into a question, sort of. When exactly did Trump's campaign say no to Russia? Was it before or after Trump stood in front of the press and said, Russia, hacked Hillary's emails and released it so that and our press will love you? How is that not collusion? And if I say hijack in an airport, aren't they going to investigate me? Aren't they going to stop me?
Yeah, look,
so,
David.
For Randy to say that it's all ridiculous,
right,
and that it's all a witch hunt. No, he stood in front of the press, in front of a camera, and said Russia hacked these emails and released them. Yeah. That alone should spark an investigation.
Yeah, and I think it did. In fact, I think you're right that the FBI was starting to look into a whole lot of things well before the election to say what's happening in the Trump administration, what's happening with Carter Page, what's happening with Paul Manafort, the reason Paul Manafort stepped down. All of that is because the government was looking at it and they're saying this is not right. This is not normal. What led to there being any thought that there would be an investigation was all of the behavior, some of which you're noting right there. It was the very behavior of the Trump administration, and there's so many contacts with and stated outreaches to Russia that caused people in the intelligence community to say, what's going on here? That's what got us to this situation. If it was just a made up kind of witch hunt, well, then they would have done it total, like they would have just finished the witch hunt, right? This is what's always falls apart in these kinds of conspiracies is why would you get all the way to the, Brett, how did you put it over the break? All the way to the goal line and then take a knee and not cross. If the whole point was to take down the Trump administration, do you really think they could run this thing for 2 years and spend $25 million, interview all these people and bring them before grand juries and then not actually bring down the Trump administration? They're having to respond to the behavior of a Trump administration that is so unbelievably damaging to this country. Even just standing up place after place after place and saying, we love WikiLeaks, while the sitting president of the United States was declaring WikiLeaks. Depending on where you are on that, you might want to say, no, I think WikiLeaks is doing a good thing. But when you're a presidential candidate who knows that WikiLeaks has just released the emails of your opponent saying you love WikiLeaks is not you being on the side of internet openness. Right, that's totally over the edge. David, do you have more thoughts on that? I didn't mean to interrupt you there. But
no, thank you much. I was just listening.
Yeah, thanks so much, David. Really appreciate it. Hey, Reverend Jack. First of all, thanks for the bumper, and secondly, how are you thinking about this Mueller report?
How's it going? Hello, how's it going?
Yeah, good.
Great show.
Thanks.
Okay, so I'll try to make this quick. I got so many things that I wanted to say, but I don't know if anyone has said this yet, but the one thought that I had earlier today is it possible that the reason that there's no evidence of collusion is because of the cover-up of the obstruction? You know what I mean? I mean, did they obstruct justice to the point where they don't have the evidence to
great point.
They believe it's true or not to actually? And I'm sorry, I came in late to the show, so maybe
no, Jack. I think that's a great point.
I guess the only other thing I want to say, and then I'll listen offline. But is I just always think that this whole thing and anything to do with Trump, I think if you change the one fact and you put Obama in there. I don't remember Obamagate or Barackgate. I don't remember any of those investigations. Yeah. But if you put him in there, and instead of Trump, people would lose their minds. Totally. You know, the conservatives would melt down. Yeah. And it's such hypocrisy to see them bend over backwards to try to make excuses for this guy. Yeah,
it's really harsh, isn't it? Right? It just makes you want to. I mean, just to hear that the old things were. I want to see his birth certificate from Donald Trump about Obama.
Yeah.
And her but what about her emails and what has gotten us to this point?
When Michelle wore the sleeveless dress, I don't know if you remember that one.
Yeah.
Or when Barack wore the tan suit, you know.
Yeah, the tan suit.
Or didn't wear the lapel flag. That's big stuff right there, buddy.
The tan suit was my favorite because I saw this clip recently. People may not remember, but there was big outcry on Fox News about Obama wearing a tan suit because it didn't look presidential. And I saw this video, and then it just cut to pictures of Ronald Reagan wearing a tan suit. It's just awesome, right? So, okay, look at and it's easy to laugh and it's easy to make fun of him. And it's always easier to find the hypocrisy in someone else. But I do worry that at some point, if there's a Democratic president that gets into trouble, that we all remember these days as well. And we try to be as above board and consistent and honest as we possibly can be. It seems like it would matter that if you're going to call for this kind of clarity of thought, that you really do ask for it all across the system.
But the thing is, they say if it suits them, they say it's true. If they don't, they say it's fake news. Every time they turn their back on all the things that they always said. The whole idea that like the office of the presidency needs to be held to a higher moral standard. And all of a sudden, what?
Right. Like, that's a good point.
I don't know.
Hey, thanks, Reverend Jack. Appreciate it. Hey, we're going to go to a break, and then Steve and Brad will get to you right after the break if you can hold on with us. AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota.
This is Brad from Robbinsdale, your old buddy, and I'm an avid listener of the Minnesota Progressive Repartee on AM 950 radio with Doug, Brett, Eric, and Hunter. And sorry to disappoint, I am not running for president.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Repartee. Glad to have all the reparteers in with us. We'll chat with Brad in Robbinsdale. Hey, Brad. How are you thinking about this Mueller report?
Yes, there were a couple of things regarding Paul Manafort that I guess I've not been able to follow up on. One is that from the Trump Tower meeting, he had notes that said something regarding contributions, but also I heard a claim that the fines that were leveled against him would pay for the Mueller investigation, but a friend told me that the judge had nullified those, those fines. And I mean, by my understanding, first of all, that he has owes about $20 million to the Russian oligarch Oleg Deripaska, and my speculation is, well, first of all, that if he's got any ready source of income, he's going to be paying for everybody's bill at the commissary for the cell block. And then I'm willing to speculate that the over and under is going to be 6 months for a shiv in the shower.
Well, thanks for the comments, Brad. I kind of hope that's not true. I know a lot of people in prison. It's a bad experience. Even our federal prisons can be really tough places for people. And Paul Manafort's actions that I think have harmed this country need to be punished, and they certainly do. But I don't wish any ill harm on him, actually, or anyone else. But you could be right that people might actually take it out on him. I don't know. He could become a cellmate convert too. That kind of stuff happens. People sort of come to their senses. Maybe he will see straight. Your thoughts that Paul Manafort and others who have had that were caught up in the Trump investigation that are being charged for other crimes, that their fees that they're paying to the federal government in terms of penalties and fees and taxes might pay for this. I don't mean to make light of $25 million. Okay, it's a lot of money. But not really in the government sense, right? Guys like Paul Manafort owe $20 million to all kinds of people for all kinds of things. So it's a lot, but not when you're trying to make sure that the president of the United States was not an asset of Russia. So in my view, that's money pretty well spent. Hey, Steve in Maple Grove, thanks for your call today.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Yeah.
I don't think we should have been too optimistic about what Mueller was going to produce in this report. Since Watergate, Republicans have been extremely effective in suppressing and squelching investigations. Look at Iran-Contra.
Yeah.
Now, Lawrence Walsh was the independent counsel. He was a Republican. He did a great job, but when it came to he had 11 indictments. It was quashed by Senior Bush when he was on his way out. He pardoned everyone, including Casper Weinberger, who could have ratted him out and probably brought down his presidency. Look at Bush Cheney. The 9/11 Commission was chaired by Thomas Kean, Republican. The executive director was Philip Zelikow. He was the executive director of Bush's campaign in 2000. It was rigged from the beginning. They never really got to the truth. We may never know the truth. Now we've got Mueller in suppressing and squelching the wrongdoing that we know Trump did. When the collusion or the conspiracy, actually, there is no such crime as collusion.
That's right, yeah.
But the conspiracy between many of the players on Trump's team and elements of Russian intelligence, and that's going to be squelched too. So, the Democrats have let all this happen. It's really pathetic, and they need to find a spine.
Yeah, Steve, thanks for your comment. I think putting that in the historical context is really helpful. And also just knowing that, look, these kinds of special investigations, they're quite disruptive. They're very painful. They're expensive to a lot of people's lives. But as you bring it out, they don't often produce criminal activity. The idea that you would find criminal activity and be prosecuted by your own Justice Department, no matter what the administration, and the long list that you put through, I think was instructive, just doesn't happen. And the other thing that doesn't happen in this country, and I think for the most part it's probably best, even though it lands a little hard, is administrations don't go back and start investigating previous administrations. It's not what we do in this country. So the next president of the United States, that wins the election in 2020, it's not going to be Donald Trump. The next president is not going to go relitigating this. It's going to be set aside. Congress has to do its role. I think Congress has abdicated its role for the first 2 years of the Trump administration by becoming lackeys and water carriers for the administration and acting like the investigation that was put together by Donald Trump's own Justice Department was not supported and rather was seen as hostile by the Republican-led House of Representatives. It shirked its responsibility. It now needs to pick them up. And when this is done is after the election. That's when it's going to be done. I know there's going to be a lot of cries for people to want to put the president in jail. I have said it repeatedly here. I'll say it elsewhere. We should not have presidents going to jail. I don't know what we do about it when you have systemic criminals like Donald Trump as the president. It makes it really hard to fulfill the obligation that we're not going to have future administrations putting previous presidents in jail. It needs to be done. And this is what makes regulating and using the criminal justice division against a sitting president so difficult. So the next time somebody says to you, it doesn't really matter who our president is, maybe it doesn't fit my conscience, I'm just going to be a little bit whiny here about the 2016 election. And a number of friends of mine from around the country in states that flipped the Electoral College that sat it out because Hillary Clinton just wasn't enough for them. This is what you get. Let's not do this again. Now, frankly, I'm just glad that we're done with this part of the investigation so that we can focus on Donald Trump's administration's bad policies, why he needs to be removed as the president, either by election or by impeachment, and look at the other criminal actions that have gone on with his campaign, with his inauguration, with money laundering, and all the other 9 investigations that are going on against the Trump administration. I mean, this guy has been a criminal enterprise for so long, getting done with one only opens you up to 9 more. It's time to be done with this president, at least in our hearts, if not in office, and to elect a Democrat in 2020. And may that be the lesson of all this, that because of Donald Trump's bad actions, this all had to go down. Now let's move on, eliminate this president from being the president through all legal means possible. And God bless the United States of America. This is Doug Pagitt on the Repartee on the Monday of the Mueller Report.